Okay, wow, how do I do this again? Oh my god, it's been a while.
We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you.
23.
Hey, what is up you guys? This is Steffi, aka In My Humble Opinion, and welcome back to another video. It's been a while since I've done a movie review. In fact, over a year since I've done a movie review. I think the last time I reviewed a movie was in 2019 and it was Judy. But obviously, you know, we haven't been going to the movie theaters because of a panoramic, if you will. But in this video, I thought I would make my grand comeback with movie reviews by talking about Malcolm and Marie. Malcolm and Marie is Netflix's latest movie starring Zendaya and John David Washington. It was written and directed by Sam Levinson and is also a movie that was shot last year during the pandemic. Just a little backstory here for those of you guys who may not be aware. Zendaya and Sam Levinson are frequent collaborators because they also work on Euphoria together. Sam Levinson is of course the creator of Euphoria and Zendaya is the star of Euphoria. In fact, she won an Emmy a couple months ago for her role as Rue. So what is Malcolm and Marie about? Malcolm and Marie is about an up-and-coming writer-director named Malcolm, played by John David Washington, who returns home from a very successful movie premiere with his girlfriend, played by Zendaya. It's super late. He thinks that they're going to celebrate, so he turns on some music. She starts making some mac and cheese, but he can tell that something is amiss. He has royally messed up somehow, and he finally gets it out of her of what he did wrong.
Your speech, Malcolm.
Oh, give me a break.
And he forgot to thank her during his speech.
You forgot to thank me, Malcolm. It's not a minor fucking detail, that's a big one.
And thus ensues a very long, exhausting, draining back and forth between Malcolm and Marie that takes place in the course of one night in one location. So as in all my movie reviews that I do on this channel, I know it's been a while, I'm going to talk about my personal pros and cons with the movie and then give my overall rating at the very end, so stay tuned. Okay, so let's get into some pros. What did I like about this movie? So, my first pro that I want to talk about is the soundtrack. I think this is probably my favorite part of the movie is the soundtrack. I think the accompanying music selection that is played throughout the film is so nicely curated. The movie features music from different eras of like jazz and soul and funk, so you hear music from artists like Duke Ellington and John Coltrane to James Brown, and then you get a little bit more like modern with Lil Sims and Outkast. But despite all of these different artists being featured in the soundtrack for the film, it all still feels very cohesive. I especially love the moments too when the music kind of underscores certain scenes, because I feel like it added a certain rhythm and syncopation to the overall effect of the scene when you could hear the music being played underneath this intense, quick back and forth between Zendaya and John David Washington. It was just like, it was really nice. And sometimes too, there were certain parts in the movie where a character would intentionally make a music selection, and when they did that, that was sort of functioning as a bit of like a subtweet moment. Like, I'm not gonna say how I really feel, but I want you to listen to the music because that's how I really feel. So listen to the lyrics. An example of this is when Marie is outside with Malcolm, and then she plays probably my favorite music cue of the entire movie, and she plays Dionne Warwick's Get Rid of Him. It's such a moment, and it's such a good song, and even Dionne tweeted about it on her Twitter, which you should all be following. My second pro of Malcolm and Marie is the cinematography. So the DP for Malcolm and Marie is a man named Marcel Rev. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But he's also a frequent collaborator of Sam Levinson. He's worked with him on his movie Assassination Nation as well as in Euphoria. So, that's cool. There's also some cool camera movement that's involved. I feel like that really shines during moments when the characters, because it's being shot in one house, they're moving from like one part of the house to the other, and it all kind of looks like one continuous take, which is very visually appealing to watch, and it also makes watching this movie feel more dynamic, considering the fact that this primarily takes place in one location. And my third pro to this movie is the house that is featured. Again, like I said earlier, there's only one location throughout the entirety of this movie, and it's the one house. Location manager, props to you. I believe I read online somewhere that it's like located somewhere in California. It looks like it's located in the middle of the desert, very isolated, which further played into like the intimacy aspect between Malcolm and Marie, because it's really just a movie featuring the two of them. So the fact that the house is also in the middle of nowhere like added to that sense of intimacy. And you know, even though the movie's just in black and white, I could tell that this house is stunning. Like, I would love if Architectural Digest were to make a video just specifically talking about the house featured in Malcolm and Marie. All right, and now we move on to the cons. Woo! Man, let me tell you, I took notes. Like, it's several pages worth of notes here, and man, here we go, buckle up. My big con to this movie is the script, which is unfortunate because the script is a huge part of any movie or TV show. For me, I personally just felt like the script was very self-indulgent. It was very pretentious. I thought the parts where the movie specifically focused on the complicated dynamic between Malcolm and Marie, it was fine. But then when Malcolm specifically started to go on his rants about film criticism, that's when it lost me. And I'm not just saying that because, oh, I think of myself as a film critic. I don't think of myself as a film critic. But every time Malcolm would start going off on one of his film rants, it felt very like elitist, self-important fanboy who got mad that his professor for his like film class didn't get his vision. Like that's what it gave me. The script for me felt very film school. Like, it felt like a film school project. I will say there's a part in his little like rant when he poses this question of who gets to make what movies. And I think that's an interesting question, and I think that's a valid question, especially considering that we are living in a time where we are very hyper aware of the power of media and the importance of people owning their stories. And in people owning their stories, it's important to note who gets to tell what stories. So I get that. I think that's a really interesting question. But it's just weird to me that Sam Levinson would take this movie and use it as an opportunity to clearly voice his own gripes about that subject matter. And he's using a black character as his proxy to speak about film criticism when he himself is a white man, but he's writing for a character who is speaking on this subject from the perspective of a black director. Like, I don't know, it was just weird, and it felt wrong. And the fact that I'm even like bringing this up as a point of critique is exactly what he talks about in the movie, so it's kind of like ironic in that way. But I feel like the only reason why he brought that up was so it would appear like he's 2 steps ahead of what people are going to criticize about this movie, and he's sort of like anticipating the critique in that way. And I feel like Sam Levinson was probably like, well, if I write this in the movie, like at least I'm addressing this critique. And that's sort of him thinking that he can have his cake and eat it too. But that's not how this works. Like, just because you bring it up in your movie doesn't make it okay. For me, the parts of the movie where Malcolm would go on his film rants, it really felt like Sam Levinson was being self-indulgent, and he was letting his own ego get in the way of telling this story about this very complicated couple. And he was using those moments as like a point of vindication for him because he got a bad review from the LA Times about his movie like a couple years ago. Okay, so the second con for me, and this might be a bit of a controversial con, so here we go, gird your loins, is the performances. So I will say before I begin, I think the first 30 minutes, even I'll say the first 45 minutes, hour, was fine. It was good. I kind of actually wish that this movie was a short instead of a full-blown hour and 43-minute movie. Or even if this movie was like a play, I think that would have been interesting. But I think performance-wise, the first half is a lot stronger than the second half. For me, John David Washington, as great as an upcoming talent he is, specifically that movie rant he does, it felt like he was overacting. It was distracting to the point where not only was I kind of tuning him out because I was just like, wow, this is so pretentious, but I was also tuning him out because what he was saying was being lost in the delivery of those lines. As far as Zendaya is concerned, I thought Zendaya was fine. fine. For me though, and this really has nothing to do with the movie, but more of just like as a general note, from the stuff that I've watched Zendaya in, be it Malcolm and Marie, Euphoria, and even the Spider-Man movies, I feel like she has a tendency to play these same characters. They're very like detached and blunt and apathetic, but they're like, you know, they're funny at the same time. And even like the way in which these characters talk, the cadence and the rhythm of like the way they speak is very similar. So I just feel like as a general note, I am hoping that one day we will see Zendaya play a different kind of character. So with that being said, I wanted to quickly just speak on sort of like the casting controversy surrounding this movie. From what I've been hearing, I've heard a lot of people were uncomfortable watching this movie because of the age gap difference between John David Washington and Zendaya. John David Washington is 36 and Zendaya is 24. And honestly, for me, I didn't feel uncomfortable watching the two of them together on screen like this. I mean, first of all, there are couples like that who exist in real life with that sort of age gap. Secondly, they're both like legal and grown. I will say though, I think after watching this movie, I would have maybe have liked to see someone else play Marie. Maybe there is an argument to be made that Zendaya was miscast. And I'm only saying that because even though Zendaya is 24, she still looks young enough. Like she's still currently playing a high school teenager in Euphoria. So she looks young enough to be that age, and perhaps that's why people were uncomfortable. And then there's also like, you know, something to be said that she's a Disney kid, and maybe some people who don't watch Euphoria are still like, oh my god, this is Zendaya, like what happened to Disney? But you know, she's grown, so like let's let her evolve and mature. But just thinking about the character of Marie, she has lived a life and she has had a lot of life experience, and I maybe would have liked to have seen a bit of a more mature, older looking actress play that character, because then I would believe that, oh yes, looking at her, I believe that she's lived that life. Whereas like if I look at Zendaya, I'm like, but you look so young. In my opinion, I personally would have loved to have seen someone like Nicole Bahari play Marie. I think she would have brought like a maturity and sophistication to the character of Marie that maybe Zendaya didn't. But at the same token, I do understand a huge reason why this movie was able to get made was because of Zendaya. Like she's literally credited as one of the producers of this movie, and she's a frequent collaborator of Sam Levinson, and it's like the politics of the industry and whatnot. Zendaya is just simply a bigger name than Nicole Bahari. But yeah, that's just kind of how I feel about the casting situation. Alright, and now my overall rating. So my overall rating for this movie is a B-. Malcolm and Marie is a movie with a lot of panache and a clear purpose of what it stylistically wants to sound and look like. Unfortunately, it gets lost in what it wants to say. The more we learned about Malcolm and Marie's toxic relationship, the less invested I became. So much so that by the time Malcolm finished listing off movies that were required viewing for my history of film class part 1 back in the day, I had to consciously force myself to finish the last 30 minutes because I've already gotten this far. This movie is exhausting, draining, and I probably will never watch it ever again. Unfortunately, Sam Levinson, like I said earlier, let his ego get the best of him instead of focusing on what this movie should have been solely about, which is the toxic nature of these two people in a relationship with one another. But if you're looking for another Sam Levinson and Zendaya collaboration with a much more focused, well-written script, I highly recommend Euphoria's standalone episode entitled Rue, Trouble Don't Last Always. Alright, well that's pretty much it. If you like this video, please give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and please turn on the notification button down below so you know when a new video from me comes out. Leave your thoughts on Malcolm and Marie. I am so interested to hear what you thought about this movie, because a lot of people have very differing opinions about the movie, and if anything, this is a movie that has sparked a lot of conversation online. Also, if you guys are looking for a new podcast to listen to, if you're a podcast listener out there, I have a podcast that I host. It's called Diva Dailies. It's a podcast where we deconstruct divas on film, TV, and in music. We're on hiatus as of right now, but there are 52 episodes that you can go back and listen to. So if you're looking for a new podcast to listen to, definitely check us out. Yeah, that is pretty much it. As always, everything I said was just my own personal thoughts and all my humble opinion, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!